Welcome to Mach 10 Sports in this October 5th, 2023 episode. Week 6, guys. It is here upon us. Got driver's seat Saturday is what I'm calling it. Whatever your favorite car is, whether it's a sports car, truck, whatever it may be, it is driver's seat Saturday. About 4 teams in the SEC. I mean, we got a driver's seat game in College Station. We got a driver's seat game in Athens. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to get out of that under that rock. Alabama at Texas A&M, Kentucky at Georgia, 2 driver's seat games in the respective divisions of the SEC West and SEC East are on the line this week. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Also, it's an opportunity game in Columbia, Missouri, in Como. Probably the biggest. We'll get into it when we're previewing all the Week 6 matchups. But the biggest home games is probably 2013, probably since their first home game against Georgia that year. Remember that one where it was what was it? What was the exact terminology? Georgia drew it on the dry erase board. It was grown man football. Back and forth between the Big 12, SEC, back and forth. That was probably the last, probably since then. But big game in Como, battle between the Tigers, LSU traveling to Missouri. LSU needs it, has to have it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Missouri would love to have it. Not a must win, but would love to have it. We also got, we'll obviously preview all 3 of those games along with Florida, Vandy, and also Arkansas, Ole Miss. I got my 7 gambling picks for this upcoming weekend's money-making weekend, Week 6 edition. Right now, we're 25-24 on the season, 52%. It's kind of where we want to be, but I want to finish the year 58-60% range. I told you, the last 3 weeks, we've been killing it. More film equals more money in your pocket. Again, if you have not already opened a fund for your kids' college tuition, I don't know what you're doing. Last 3 weeks, you could be putting that stuff away, saving that. They get into college, they get a ton of money. I'm telling you, you keep listening. Wait till basketball season and baseball season come around. It's only going to get better. Again, first 3 weeks, we're filling it out, kind of getting a feel for each team. The last 3 weeks, I should say first 2 weeks. If you include week 0, 3 weeks. Last 3 weeks, weeks 4, 5, 3, and 4 and 5, we've been killing it. Again, 25-24 on the season, 52%. Most great professional bettors would just like to be around 50%. We're just a notch above that. But again, we've gotten better over the year. That's all you can ask for. But first, let's go around the SEC. NCAA, in case you missed it yesterday, announced they will prohibit recruits taking photos, doing photo shoots on unofficial visits. Let me repeat that. The NCAA prohibits photo shoots on unofficial visits now. If you don't, for prospects, if you don't know what that means, prospects really used to just be jerseys back 2014, 15. Then it starting about 2017, 18, a full-on uniform, pads, helmets, pants, glove, cleats, armbands, wristbands, whatever you wanted it, different props coming in, backdrops. Kids would come on campus, could take pictures whenever they wanted. They could do it 5, 6 times. I mean, just off the top of my head, for A&M fans that listen, you remember Bobby Brown, Trey Brown from Lamar, Arlington? I think he got drafted by the Rams, LA Rams. Was a good player. He maybe came and did a photo shoot. I'd have to ask somebody, them buddies who are at different places now, 7 or 8 times with different buddies. It wasn't him. It's usually just for his buddies. Now, I get it. If I was a big-time recruit, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not only for me, but for my buddies who come along. They would like to get in those uniforms. But again, it just became a little bit too much, especially from an unofficial visit standpoint. Most guys coming in, the big-time guys averaging getting 4 or 5 different photos in different uniforms. When I worked at UCF, they're kind of like a step below Oregon from a standpoint of uniforms. They have a ton of uniforms. They always have a space uniform that gets voted top 5 uniform in college football each year. I mean, kids like to try on. My point being, UCF had a ton of different uniform combinations, so kids wanted to get in multiple ones. But I will say this, they can still do it on official visits. If you don't know what official visits are, that's when the school will pay for the prospect and up to 2 guests, all their expenses for a weekend, a 48-hour period. 1 second. Oh, we're good now. Sorry, I thought something went out for just a minute. Apologize. No, but official visits. That's when you get 5 official visits if you're a prospect for about for 48 hours with 2 guests, meals, hotels, everything paid for, some per diem. If you drive, you get your gas money reimbursed. If you flew, you get your flights paid for. You can get photos from that. Everybody's fine with that, I think, because those are selective. Schools get about 56 of those visits. It may change a little bit with the new roster rules. But again, like those are actually guys you're recruiting. You're wanting. You don't mind doing that. It also fits into the schedule on Saturday night after a dinner. It's something to do for about an hour for them and their family, their brothers and sisters, whoever may come, grandma and grandpa, to get in photos. But again, those guys are actually real prospects. It's when it gets like a 7-on-7 team comes and you're wanting to recruit 2 or 3 of them, but you got to get about 50, 55 of them in a uniform. That happens all the time in the spring throughout the summer. I'm glad they put an end to this from an official visit standpoint. Met in the middle. OVs, official visits, they can still get pictures. It just became too much. I mean, a lot of it was coaches didn't like it. Support staff members really didn't like it. But a lot of times the coaches wouldn't protect their support staff members and their creative designers who actually did the work, because at the end of the day, if a kid came up to you and said, hey, Coach Malzahn, Ohio State let me do it. You are going to tell me I can't take pictures? Right, wrong, or indifferent, you're probably going to do it because you don't want to lose a kid over him wanting pictures. But I always used to say it to the coaches. The kids will tell you who they are. They'll tell you who they are by their actions. Heck, if you won't come to me because I didn't give you or you or your buddies or your family enough photos, are you really about football? Are you wanting to skip like meeting with your coaches on the visit to talk about X's and O's or academic visits because you want pictures? Do I want you in my program? I know people are going to be like, well, hey, Boomer, get out of here. Like, this is the time. This is the modern time now. Yeah, but unless you've worked in it, you don't understand how excessive it got. None of the adults in the room wanted to say, hey, guys, we can't do this. It's always just like, well, Ohio State. The coach didn't want to tell that guy because he was afraid he wasn't going to get that would affect that kid's recruitment. The head coach is so locked in on his own stuff. They wouldn't ever realize it unless they heard it from their support staff member or assistant coaches. It was just all over the place. Everybody's going to be like, well, don't they have bigger things to worry about than photo shoots? I'm telling you, this is a bigger deal than you think. So touche for finally getting this done, coaches, NCAA. I don't care if people are making fun of it. If you've worked in it, if you've had boots on the ground, very important. NCAA prohibits photo shoots on unofficial visits. Official visits can still happen. Moving on, Kirby Smart. He thinks every team in the SEC should be ranked in the top 25. And I say this humbly. I've watched more teams in the SEC so far this year than Kirby Smart has, and probably will, because I watch every game on Sunday after each game on Sunday. Kirby Smart watches his game and their next opponent. Now, Kirby Smart will not probably watch Alabama unless it's through cross playing, which happens with teams like Tennessee and Kentucky this year, because that's who Alabama plays, unless Georgia plays Alabama in the SEC championship game. But I would say I've watched more teams in the SEC than Kirby Smart has so far. Humbly saying that. Kirby Smart's forgotten more football than I know, but I'm just saying my eyes have watched more football than Kirby Smart has from an SEC standpoint. He said in a press conference yesterday, or 2 days ago, I forget, it's our last episode on Monday, he thinks every team in the SEC should be ranked in the top 25. What are we talking about here, Kirby? Let's pull up the AP top 25 real fast. Not that I even keep up with the AP. It's actually a pretty terrible poll. I mean, first of all, Texas A&M isn't even in the top 25, just to let you know that. That's where we're standing. But the SEC right now, Georgia ranked number 1. We'll keep going down. We got Alabama coming in at 11th. We have Ole Miss coming in at 16th. We have Kentucky at 20th, Missouri 21st, Tennessee 22nd, LSU at 23rd. And that's it. I mean, I agree with them. Texas A&M should probably be in. I mean, I'd trade out Texas A&M for LSU right now. I don't know how LSU's still ranked in the top 25. I think on paper that could change. And I like LSU this week against Missouri. We'll get into that here in just a minute. But right now, A&M has an easier argument. I mean, people are like, oh, they got beat by Miami. Well, Miami's going to probably play in the ACC championship, guys. Miami, yes, you heard it. Miami's probably going to play in the ACC championship. Miami's better than just what people think. This isn't your little brother's last 10 years, Miami. I'm not saying they're a national title CFP contender, but they're better. It's not a bad loss. But I don't know who Kirby wants in the top 25. I mean, I'm not putting South Carolina in over anybody in the 20 range. I mean, I'd maybe drop LSU out. I mean, I'm not putting Arkansas in any of that. We're definitely not putting Vandy. We're definitely not putting Auburn. I mean, they put a valid effort up against Georgia last week. I get it. He probably didn't fully mean it, but again, some of that stuff. And this is an SEC podcast, guys. This is Mach 10 Sports. We cover football, basketball, and baseball in the conference. I would love for every team in the SEC to be ranked top 25. That would help me. That would help my business. It's just not the case. I don't know why coaches talk out of their ass sometimes when it comes to that. That was just kind of an asinine statement. Don't really get that. But again, I would just love to ask Kirby, who does he think should be in the top 25? I agree with you, Texas A&M. But who are you going to supplement them in for besides another SEC team in LSU? I just sometimes don't get what who would he like? Again, South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi State. I just don't think so. I just don't think so. But just wanted to bring that up. Continuing on around the SEC. Anybody hear that? They just debunked it before the show. The Jalen Milroe hamstring that people are saying he's limited this week, that it happened in practice. I'm starting to think. We'll talk about Alabama A&M in just a minute. I'm starting to think Vegas is throwing that out there. They want more money on A&M. And if you're picking A&M, that may scare you a little bit because it's why somebody on a podcast stated a lot of people out in Vegas think Jalen Milroe has a hamstring injury that Alabama's hiding. Everybody you talk to that you trust within the Alabama program says that couldn't be further from the truth. If you listen to Nick Saban on the Pat McAfee show today, as he normally gets on Thursday afternoon, didn't even mention it, said he talked to Milroe right before the show talking about, hey, I know you're going to Texas. Let's don't make this game bigger than it is. Just go do what you've been doing. We should be fine if you do that. Besides the point, I'm talking about his hamstring here. Not that Nick Saban didn't even come out on the Pat McAfee show and say that he had a hamstring. But again, where does this stuff come from? Apparently people out in Vegas, you watch the next round guys. They said they hit up a bunch of their guys. What was his name? I forget the Vegas guy they get on their show. I forget what his name is. I apologize. But even he was like, they're like, is this true? People in Alabama and everybody who's checked with their sources that I've talked to as well says this is totally false. So I don't know if Vegas is trying to get more people to go bet on A&M. So when Alabama wins, they make a lot of money. Because the line started off at 7.5 on Sunday for a brief 5 minutes. Now it's down to 1.5, less than 48 hours before kick. Big line change. It's interesting, but I know Jalen Milroe does not have a hamstring issue. I do know that. LSU going over to the boot. Probably been a rough week over there, if I had to guess. Didn't get any better. LSU DB Deuce Chestnut, who did not travel with the team to Oxford last week, is no longer with the team, according to Brian Kelly. I don't think he's done forever. He's just currently not with them. It's another body, though, in the backfield. The Syracuse transfer from Camden, New Jersey. I remember recruiting him when I was in college football. Yeah, it's weird. He's not with the program right now. Just from a pure body standpoint, I don't know about – I'm sure he's off the team for some reason, character issue, not being all bought in. Hearing that side of the ball for LSU on defense is not great right now. Not really connecting with the coaches if you're going – if you know what I mean with that. Interesting, though. He's going. They're losing bodies. Obviously, prayers up for Greg Brooks, the safety from LSU, the transfer from Arkansas. Everybody knows he had a brain tumor. It came out. Pray for him. He's got a long road ahead. But praying for the LSU family, Arkansas family, guys that know him. But it's like he has some form of brain cancer. So that's obviously football is a long thought away from that. He was a big loss on the football field, but praying for them as well. Talking about LSU. And in case you missed it, crazy week in Arkansas. I'm about to read it to you. I saw someone posted this. Crazy week in Arkansas right now. Recap of the week in Fayetteville. Obviously, the loss to A&M wasn't good. Third loss of the year already. Strength and conditioning coach, his wife tweeting, be supportive or go away, then putting herself on private when they've only been there 3 months. It's not a good way to get after the fan base after 3 straight losses. Offensive coordinator Dan Enos emailing students back who reached out to him about play calling in Arlington against Texas A&M, asking why he did not get under center with a 6'4" quarterback, 240, 250 pounds, and KJ Jefferson and sneak it under center. He asked them, what play call would you have rather called? And then kind of started spatting back and forth with some students who emailed him. Don't know why you would ever go get in an argument with students if you're the offensive coordinator. Never understood that. Is your ego that small, Dan? Come on, man. 2 + 2 = 4. Let's use a little common sense. That's not good either. A video of Sam Pittman. This is actually one, if you're an Arkansas fan and myself, I'm pretty fired up about. Getting after the O-line in some practice videos this week, saying this is the University of effing Arkansas. Never really heard him cuss much. But getting after the Arkansas unit, you got to like that. That's the only one. That's the only one I would really be real fired up about if I was a Razorback fan right now. The other one, your offensive coordinator, emailing back students about your play calling. Come on, dude. Come on, dude. You got to have a little more willpower than that. And then Arkansas assistant strength coach's wife challenging Arkansas fans and then going private where they can't respond. I don't get it. Some things rough and faithful, but again, they're heading to Oxford for a Saturday night matchup with Ole Miss. They got to get back right. It's a must-win game for them. It's a driver's seat weekend, but it's also a must-win for a couple teams in this league this week. Transitioning over to basketball, basketball practices start November 4th, first matchup. We're about a month away. Unfortunately for Mississippi State, though, Mississippi State fans, not great news. Forward Tolu Smith is going to be out until conference play due to a foot injury. Their best player overall from a defensive standpoint, rebound, and not best scorer. I think State's actually going to be pretty good this year, but that's a tough loss right there. I don't know the significance of it. Is it going to be a lingering thing in the conference play? Because that will be a big deal. I think State's going to be a tournament team this year, but that kind of makes you a little hesitant. Another announcement, SEC Basketball Media Days will be October 18th coming up. It's on a Wednesday, October 18th. So that'll be big. Basketball season's upon us. But, hey, it's week 6. Let's get into some previews. But first, let's share some SEC standings. Let's go into some SEC standings heading into this one. So where we stand going into week 6. SEC East, I told you, driver's seat game. Georgia, Kentucky, both tied at the top, 2-0. You could throw Missouri in there. They just played one less conference game. They're 1-0 as well. Florida coming at 1-1, tied with Tennessee right now, both 1-1. South Carolina 1-2, and Vanderbilt sits at 0-2. Going to the West, driver's seat game, we mentioned it. Both Alabama, Texas A&M sitting atop of the West right now, 2-0. LSU comes in at 2-1. Ole Miss 1-1. And then we got some zeros in the win column for the next 3 teams. Arkansas, Auburn, and Mississippi State all winless in conference. Arkansas and Auburn sitting at 0-2. Mississippi State sitting 0-3. But with that being said right now, let's get to the first one in chronological order of how it's going to go on Saturday. First, LSU at Missouri, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time kickoff on ESPN. Currently, LSU favored by 5.5 according to DraftKings. Setting the tone for you on this one. Biggest home game in a decade. I mentioned it. Price of 2013, their first SEC home game against Georgia that year for the Missouri Tigers. Missouri's a real chance to win this football game. You took the brands off the helmet and watch the film. These are pretty equal teams. If you took that Missouri Tiger face off, you took the LSU Tiger face off, the gold helmets and the letters LSU, Missouri's playing better right now. They don't have a better roster from top to bottom. They're playing better right now. Both teams have matchups they can take advantage of. LSU, though, in a must-win situation. I keep hearing people, Joel Klatt came out and said he doesn't think the SEC champion may get left out of the playoffs. Do not believe that at all unless we got a lot of teams, one-loss conference champs, like one of the Big Ten champs, Pac-12 champs, Big 12, or the ACC, one-loss champs get in and you have a two-loss SEC champ. May happen. But a one-loss SEC champ, no, not getting left out. But again, if LSU were to win out and win the SEC at 11-2, there's a chance they still may get in. So that's not all lost. If they lose this weekend, it's over, and probably the SEC West is out of contention too. Very interesting. Can LSU, just in general, it's probably one of the biggest must-wins of anyone in the country, not just in the league. But can the defense for LSU just play average? Can they play average? They're facing a quarterback. Brady Cook has not been talked about the last 3 weeks. You've heard a lot about Jaden Daniels, Jackson Dart, Spencer Rattler, guys like that. Brady Cook has thrown 0 interceptions on the year and has been connecting with Luther Burden on a consistent basis since the Kansas State game. They started off a little inconsistent before that, but since the Kansas State game, they've been hitting on all cylinders. Defensively, Eli Drinkwitz came out and said it. He came out and said it straight up and said, LSU is not beating us deep. They're going to have to drive the field. So you may see a lot of cover 4, but where this game will be won, hear me out. 2 things here. Where this game will be won, the battle between the LSU defensive line and Missouri's defensive line, and who contains, battle of LSU's offensive line, Missouri's defensive line, and who contains both teams' difference makers better. And when I'm talking about difference makers, I'm talking about Luther Burden and Malik Neighbors. Again, LSU's offensive line versus Missouri's defensive line, and who contains both teams' difference makers better in Luther Burden and Malik Neighbors. I say this because both guys are equal explosive plays to me. They really do. Both teams feed their wide receivers on a regular basis. Luther Burden, if you're an LSU fan, compares a little bit to Kayshon Boutte, if you want to be honest. Now, Burden, who has the most receiving yards, second most receptions in the country, is used more in the screen game, short throws than Neighbors is. He's going to test your corner's ability to tackle in space, so LSU better get ready for that. Expect from an LSU standpoint and from Missouri, though, to see a lot of slot fade from both teams. You know this route that it feels like Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors have mastered throughout this year. But both quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels, Brady Cook, phenomenal right now. You may be thinking I'm going to say who covers the best is going to win this game. And that's true to some extent. Whoever wins the back end will win this game. That may be true to some extent. Obviously, that's true. I expect a lot of cover four for both teams here. I think a lot of teams, how patient can both these defensive coordinators be for both Missouri and LSU? But we're going to go another prediction here. The other key in this game is going to be LSU's defensive line winning their one-on-one battles and obviously stopping the run up front, but also creating a pass rush by winning their individual matchups. That's going to be key. LSU's defensive line winning their individual matchups will be key as well here. There's a lot of this game a little bit when you were doing some self-scout on it, went a lot of different directions, really. I mean, you could have Luther Burden, who stops the explosive playmakers. I mentioned that. LSU's offensive line. Then I'm also throwing in kind of a third one here. Does LSU's defensive line step up and kind of win their one-on-one battles? Mekhi Wingo, the former Missouri Tiger, coming back to his hometown. He's from St. Louis. Can Mason Smith step up? I know he's coming off an ACL tear, but he's been playing soft. Can a Jordan Jefferson step up? The West Virginia transfer for LSU. Need some guys on the edge. Savion Jones. Can Ovi Ogafo step up? I mean, I know he's a backer, but that front needs to step up. But prediction. You probably think I'm going to pick a lower score game than most predict in my selections of where this will be won. You're probably going to think just the way I'm talking about the defense and limiting explosive plays, some guys or teams are going to, both defenses are going to be willing to give up the 6 to 8 yard plays instead of letting receivers or playmakers run behind them. However, I do think both teams have good offensive play calling days and will take advantage of both defenses again. I don't see either defense in the secondary just getting better over a week. I will be interested, though, to see how patient, I said it earlier, LSU's offense and Missouri's defense will be playing cover four. How patient they will be. Who will blink first, really? What coordinator is going to not panic after giving an 8-yard gain or something? Just like, hey, let them drive the field. Let's win in the red zone. Can LSU be patient enough to drive the field, and can Missouri's defense play back and let LSU make the mistake? And vice versa. Can LSU's defense be patient and see if Missouri struggles in the red zone? Expect a lot of yards after the catch in this one, as both teams are not great tackling teams, and both teams have success in the red zone. LSU gets a late touchdown from a Jaden Daniels to Chris Hilton connection, and the Tigers hold off a last-second heave by Missouri to preserve a much-needed road win in the SEC. It's going to be close, but give me the LSU Tigers in this one, 38-31. Give me the LSU Tigers here, 38-31. Moving on, Alabama at Texas A&M, 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on CBS. Alabama currently a favorite by 1.5 on DraftKings. Remember, it started off on Sunday for a blink second. If you blinked, you probably missed it. Alabama was favored by 7, I think 7.5. I saw it somewhere too. But setting the tone, people I see keep coming out and saying this could be a tenure-defining game for Nick Saban. I don't get that. I mean, 17 seasons in, the guys won 6 national championships. Why would this be a season or a tenure-defining game for Nick Saban at the University of Alabama? Not even a top 5 one. I mean, thinking back on it, maybe 2016 game for Ole Miss, 2012 Georgia in the SEC championship, 2015 in Athens. That's when they're back against the wall after they'd already lost to Ole Miss. There's been plenty of other ones. But in my opinion, this is the biggest game for Jimbo Fisher in his time at Texas A&M. If there was a time for them to beat Alabama, there was a year to insert yourself in the upper echelon of the SEC. It's this one for Texas A&M. If not now, when? In the last year of the SEC West, it could not be more open. This is a driver's seat game right here. Winner is in the driver's seat to win the SEC West. Now, in regards to Alabama, I'll say this. It would be a top 3 impressive win over the past 3 seasons for Alabama. It'd be up there with obviously not the circumstances and the ticket getting punched in the college football playoff, but beating Georgia in the 2021 SEC championship game. But it'd be probably 3rd. This would be a massive road win for Alabama, given what you know right now from the offense. a massive road win. This will be the most difficult game on Alabama's schedule, I think, because you got to think the Tennessee game, LSU games at home. The Auburn game is going to be tough because Jordan Hare's weird. But I think this, from a look on paper, where it's at, this is the toughest game on Alabama's schedule. Kyle Field's going to be loud. They feel like Texas A&M right now feels like they're the better team. They're cautiously optimistic, their fans. The team's a little bit more confident. But they right now think they're the better team. How the Alabama, though, offense handles that, plus a really good defensive front, will be telling. Will Texas A&M miss Connor Weigman's mobility inside the pocket, or will Max Johnson's kind of tenure in college football, he feels like he's like 38 years old at this point, and experience help push the Aggies over the edge? Also, keep an eye on Bobby Petrino's scheming runs to the edges to test Alabama's inside backers, Jahad Campbell, Kendrick Blackshire, and Trez Marshall. Also, it sounds like Deontay Lawson may be playing in this one, but if he doesn't, and if he's not 100, he's not going to be 100%. That could be questionable for Alabama. Alabama was a little late. They played well for the most part at inside linebacker last week, but when Jaquavius Woody Marks got to the edge for Mississippi State last week a little bit, Alabama struggled a little bit there. Does A&M go to that in the run game? Because I think they're going to have to establish some kind of run game. But where this game will be won, it's going to be Alabama's offensive line versus Texas A&M's defensive line front seven. Again, I said in the last episode, A&M has produced an insane 30 tackles for loss and 15 sacks in the last 2 weeks against SEC teams, against conference foes. I don't care if that's against the Fighting Helen Kellers down the road. That's impressive. I don't care if that's against a local middle school team in College Station or against A&M Consolidated High School. That's impressive. 30 tackles for loss and 15 sacks in the last 2 weeks against SEC teams. This matchup is going to be massive in determining the outcome, because the ultimate key in this game is going to be who wins the most on first down. Alabama cannot get Jalen Milroe in 2nd and 7, 3rd and 7 type situation. This includes pre-snap penalties, procedural penalties by the Alabama offensive line. That can't happen. It can't be 1st and 15 right off the bat. The communication has to be sharp by all 11 guys on offense. They struggled that a few times this past weekend in Starkville, but it's going to be really loud at Kyle Field. If you've never been there, not overly hostile, but loud. Massive game and massive opportunity for Alabama offensive coordinator Tommy Rees to come up with a really good defensive game plan. I'm not overly sold on DJ Durkin as a great play caller, but their front, they've recruited so well in the defensive line, and they're about 6'7" deep. That'll make any defensive coordinator look good. Just let them go play. Again, I do think, though, if Alabama Smart get the quick, short game going to make A&M secondary prove they can tackle in space. That's how Miami got them. Just short underneath crossers that turn into big plays that ultimately allowed A&M or got A&M to come up and let Miami go over the top. Got a lot of yards after the catch, Miami did. It also negates the pass rush, too. But at the end of the day, the offensive line is going to have to establish some kind of respectable run game. That will be the key. Prediction, I think A&M hits a few shots to Aniyah Smith or Evan Stewart late to rally and get a fantastic win in Kyle Field this week. Alabama's offensive line plays okay, and probably you could make an argument, I think, could play well enough to win the game. But they and the Alabama offensive line stall out, I'm going to guess, about 2 times in the red zone, and Will Reichard's going to have to come in, finish that. They're settling for 3 instead of 6. That's going to be the ultimate difference maker. I think it's going to be proved costly for Alabama as too many red zone stallouts and the A&M defense step up when it has to. Am I confident in this prediction that A&M wins? Absolutely not. Probably a 2.5 on a 1 through 10 scale on confidence. I think A&M has the line of scrimmage advantage on defense, and the explosive skill guys hit 3 or 4 plays that prove to be backbreaking through the air. They're going to have to, because I think A&M and Alabama are not going to be able to produce sustaining drives more than once or twice, I think, on each other. Explosive plays and turnovers are going to be key in this game. Again, I think A&M gets a couple more explosive plays, wins the turnover battle, limits Alabama in their explosive plays, an exceptional defensive front by Texas A&M. I think that leads to A&M. When we close the book on Saturday night, they will be atop the SEC West standings. Give me A&M here, 24-20. However, this was my preseason prediction too. My 2 losses for Alabama going into the year were to Texas and Texas A&M. I still have Alabama ended up winning the West. I think the SEC West is going to come down to a showdown in Baton Rouge, where LSU is going to have a chance to ruin A&M's season. I know I'm giving you a little sneak peek preview about a month and a half away. I still think Bama's going to win the West, but they do lose this game on Saturday in College Station. Moving on. Vanderbilt at Florida, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on the SEC Network. Florida currently favored by 18.5, according to DraftKings. Setting the tone. Who wants to get right in this game? And what I mean, who wants to get right? Both teams need this. Both teams need wins here. Vandy has not had a win since week 1 because they played week 0. Remember, they beat Hawaii, then beat Alabama A&M, dropped one to Wake, dropped one to UNLV, then dropped some conference games since. And Florida's coming in licking their wounds after kind of, for lack of a better term, getting physically whipped by Kentucky and Lexington last week. What's the morale like in Nashville? They've already pulled quarterbacks, brought Ken Seals in, benched A.J. Swan. But hell, what's the morale in Gainesville, Florida right now? That looks like a totally disinterested team last week, especially on defense. I don't really give the offense too much crap because they got down so quick, 17, 23, nothing. That game plan had to change, and that doesn't play to Florida's hand when they're having to stretch the field. But just let's wake up a little bit. I don't know if it's the 11 a.m. kickoff in Lexington. I don't know what it was. Was it the color blue that lulled them to sleep? I don't know, but Florida's defense looked totally disinterested. But this is a very favorable matchup for the Gators, and here's why. It's a very favorable matchup to get back in the win column. Here's why. This is Vanderbilt has not stopped anyone in the secondary this year. Vandy's skill guys, the receivers, are good enough to win. Guys like Will Shepherd, but everything else leaves a lot desired, and especially the secondary. Florida's got a massive matchup advantage there, and they have to take advantage of it because next week this is a must-win game. I mean, Billy Napier might as well pack his bags if he loses this. That'd be back-to-back losses. He's 0-2 against Vanderbilt, and you lose at home. You might as well lose at Nashville if you're going to lose to Vanderbilt, not in front of the whole home crowd. Not saying they are. Let me get to the prediction. But this week and next week in Columbia, South Carolina are must-wins. And for Vanderbilt, who's starting at quarterback? Clark Lee said they hadn't made a decision yet. Is it A.J. Swan or is it Ken Seals? He didn't seem like he was that upset with Ken Seals' performance, but the offensive line, and it wouldn't matter if Patrick Mahomes is back there right now. They're struggling to protect. But where this game will be won, can Graham Mertz take advantage of Vanderbilt's poor secondary that I just mentioned? Vandy's going to load the box and dare Florida to stretch the field. At least that's what I would do if I was a defensive coordinator. And then Clark Lee's a defensive guy. He's a smart guy. I respect his scheme. I think he'll do the same. It's going to come down to true freshman Andy Jean and can a guy like Ricky Pearsall win their one-on-one matchups outside for Florida? If Florida can make plays deep this game's going to get away from Vanderbilt and probably quickly. They need it. Prediction, I do think Florida hits a few explosive plays on offense, probably by the midpoint of the second quarter. It seems starting a little slow, but by the midpoint, I think they're hitting. Would be surprised if they haven't by that point, honestly. Again, I want to see a more interested Florida team this week. Remember, just so disinterested, especially on defense last week. Just didn't even look like they really – still looked like they were waking up. And remember, those 11 a.m. kickoffs, thoroughly wake-up time, long travel, Florida to Kentucky. They just look disinterested. I need to see a little fire under some people if I'm Florida. That's the key, getting them ready. This game's a little bit more than that. It's at 3 o'clock, so they want to worry about the early start. But Florida's passing game isn't great, but Vandy's secondary is not good at all. Also, throwing Vandy can be turnover prone, and I expect a Jason Marshall, Jordan Castile, maybe defensive score for Florida in the secondary. Florida needs this more and still has some things to play for. Vandy, no offense, but a bowl berth right now, 6 wins seems like 3 time zones away. It seems about from New York City to San Francisco, California. Total afterthought. Florida still has issues, but pulls away from Vandy and sets up a much-needed must-win against South Carolina next week, who's on a bye week. That'll be a must-win at Williams-Brice Stadium for both teams. Both teams need it. They want to go probably overachieve in their season. But again, I think Florida gets the 38-14 win at home this week against Vanderbilt. Moving on. Kentucky at Georgia, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, kickoff on ESPN. Georgia minus 14.5, according to DraftKings. Set the tone for you here. First place in the SEC East is on the line in Athens this week. Again, another driver's seat game in the SEC East. We talked about Alabama, Texas A&M being that in the West. Georgia survived its first road test last week in Auburn. This one is in the friendly confines of Sanford Stadium. Kentucky played phenomenal on defense last week. They really did, especially the defensive line, and really got the run game going last Saturday against Florida. Mark Stoops, though, 0-10 against Georgia in his career, and this again feels like a bounce-back game for Georgia. Granted, I did think the same thing a couple weeks ago for the South Carolina game. Is Georgia going to have that game this year where they come out and dominate, or are they just going to kind of be at 2019 Georgia with Jake Fromm and kind of just Let's get to the finish line and see where it goes. We don't ever really put a full game together. We just keep winning, which is fine. It's all about winning. If you have more points than the other team at the end of the day, it's all that matters. But do they put an overall just very impressive performance? I haven't seen that with Georgia yet this year. I do think Kentucky quarterback Devin Leary is going to have to play the best game of his career. The NC State transfer, while Kentucky played well overall in offense last week, he's only 9 for 19 for 69 yards and a touchdown. That's not going to go win in Athens. It's not going to beat Georgia in Athens. But where this game will be won, Georgia's front seven versus Kentucky's rushing attack. If Georgia stops the run, they're going to win this game. It's that simple. 2 + 2 = 4. They stop the run game with Kentucky's Big Blue Wall and Ray Davis. They're going to win this game. If you go back and watch Kentucky's game against Florida, if you go back and watch it, again, we watch every Sunday, all the replays. Florida missed a lot of tackles. Some of it wasn't scheme. Sometimes they probably had too light of a box. Kentucky would have 6 blockers, and Florida would have 6 guys in the box. It was an easy mismatch. They got out schemed. Let's call it what it is. But when Austin Anderson, Florida's defensive coordinator, did call the correct plays, they missed tackles. I mean, got to give Liam Cohen and the Big Blue Wall credit. That was the best game that the Kentucky offensive line's had in 2 years. You got to give them credit for executing their blocking scheme. But on some of those explosive runs by Ray Davis, if you go back and watch, defenders were there, but missed tackles extended those plays. And since Kirby Smart's good news for Georgia fans, since Kirby Smart's been at Georgia, they've been one of the better tackling teams in the league. They've been one of the best tackling teams in the SEC, if not the country. And some may point to, well, Georgia gave up 218 yards on the ground last week to Auburn. But if you go back and look, really, 125 of those were from Auburn's quarterbacks. Remember Peyton Thorne had the big, long run. That's a lot of it. Devin Leary isn't the threat to run like Peyton Thorne. Not that he's Michael Vick or anything, but he's more of a runner than Devin Leary, and definitely Robbie Ashford is, who had a touchdown for Auburn last week. So you got to remember, 125 to 218 rushing yards on Georgia last week were from the quarterbacks, not the running backs. That's who Kentucky wants to run with, is Ray Davis. I don't really see that happening a ton against Georgia's front. Prediction. I like Kentucky. I like the Cats. I really do. I had them predicted to finish second in the SEC East going into the year. I still feel decent about that. But outside of last week, they've been very inconsistent on offense. I mentioned Leary struggled some. The wide receivers still have drop issues. Even going back to last week, go watch watch it against Florida. They had some drops. The offense hasn't put it all together. They had a great rushing attack last week. But outside of that, not much. It's been either quarterback hadn't played well. There's been drops by the receivers. The offensive line couldn't get it going. Obviously they did last week, but I'm talking about the 4 games before that. Again, if Devin Leary was a little better in the run game, I may like Kentucky a little more here. But again, most of the yards given up on the ground last week were to Auburn's quarterbacks, who bring more of a running threat than Devin Leary, like I mentioned. That threat's not there this week. It's going to come down to Georgia's ability to stop the run and tackle. Georgia has been consistently great at both in the last 6 years. The offense has enough weapons for Georgia against a solid Kentucky defense. I think the best thing this offense does, Mike Bobo in this offense and Carson Beck, this week is convert on third downs, extend drives to ultimately wear down the Cats' defense. Give me Georgia looking productive and efficient on offense, plus either, I'm going to guess, a Georgia defensive score or a special team score, and I like Georgia to pull away by the start of the fourth quarter. Give me Georgia 34-17. I think Kirby Smart's just going to accept. You heard him say every team in the SEC should be ranked. I think he started to say, hey, we're not going to go just dominate teams this year. We're good, but we're not as good as we were the last 2 years, and that's fine. I think he's just like, we just need to win games. So I think this week he's going to go and, hey, we're just efficient on offense, convert in the red zone, get 8, 10-play drives, and make Kentucky try to start stretching the field. We get up early, 14-17-0. Make Kentucky start throwing downfield. They haven't put a complete offensive game together yet. And people are going, well, what did they do last week? They almost ran for 300 yards. That was the running game with a lot of missed tackles. Devin Leary and the receivers, again, did not play great last week. They did. So give me Georgia the 34-17 win over the Kentucky Wildcats. And finally, the last conference matchup, we obviously still got Mississippi State and Western Michigan. We're not going to preview that one in depth, but we'll go over that one real quick. But the last conference matchup, Arkansas at Ole Miss, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on the SEC Network. Ole Miss currently favored by 11.5, setting the tone for you here. Ole Miss coming off an emotional win last week against LSU. Probably the biggest win in the Lane Kiffin era, for being honest. How do they respond to that? They responded well after they got off the mat after losing to Alabama in a game a lot of people had them win and beating LSU net last week. And Ole Miss, if I'm being honest, is the better team. They're the better team than Arkansas. But again, how do they handle that? How does a team full of transfers handle a little bit of success? KJ Jefferson coming back to the home state, a kid from Batesville, playing 30 minutes, 20 minutes down the road. Usually has a big game against one of the Mississippi schools. KJ Jefferson has played well just against Ole Miss in his career. But does it matter if his offensive line can't protect him or establish a run game? I would have loved to have been in the offensive staff meetings and the offensive line meetings with Sam Pittman and offensive line coach for Arkansas, Cody Kennedy, this week. How would that go? You saw Sam Pittman caught on camera this week saying, hey, we're the University of F in Arkansas. We got to start blocking and dominating people. So that's been reinforced their offensive line. Hey, this is on you guys. How's it going to challenge them when he challenges their manhood? Going to the other side of the ball, can the Arkansas defense slow down the Rebs at all? The Razorback defense is better this year for sure by new DC Travis Williams, playing faster, more aggressive, more physical, and they've shown flashes at times of putting together 2 or 3 series in a row. But then it just goes down the drain, man. Like against LSU, they played well in the first half, and then the last drive against LSU and throughout the entire second half they struggled. And then midway through the third quarter, through the rest, they just let A&M convert situations when they could have got off the field. Then staying on that side of that matchup, does the Ole Miss offensive line, they stay like they were last week? They play like they did last week? Or do they go back to how they played the previous 4 weeks against Tulane, Alabama, and Georgia Tech and struggled up front? It's a very intriguing game to me. Ole Miss did some different things last week offensively, mixing up scheme. So how does that transition? Doing a little bit more duo last week. So how does that? Very intriguing game. Very intriguing game. How does Ole Miss handle success? Arkansas's backs are literally pressed against the wall. It's not up against it. It's pressed, getting smushed, getting crushed. They have to win this one. They go to Tuscaloosa next week. Remember that hellacious 4-game stretch of at LSU, Texas A&M, and Arlington, Ole Miss and Oxford, and Alabama and Tuscaloosa. 4 straight weeks. 4 straight weeks. They have to win this game. It's a must-win game. You probably start having some guys check out. But where this game will be won, who wins third down when Arkansas has the ball? That's where this is going to be won. Arkansas was 5 of 15 last week on third down, and a lot of that was third and long situations. The Ole Miss defense allowed LSU last week to convert 5 of 10 on third downs. Arkansas has to be able to extend drives and keep the Rebel offense on the sidelines. Again, KJ Jefferson in the run game will be key. And Arkansas doesn't hide it. They like to run the football. I'm looking it up right now. The Razorbacks run the football 57% of the time on offense. They're not even hiding that. They want to run the football with A.J. Green, Dominion, and then when Rocket Sanders is healthy, and then obviously KJ Jefferson. They want to run the football. If Arkansas, however, though, if they're in long situations on Saturday night, they're not going to be able to keep up with Ole Miss. They're just not. Prediction. I think it's going to be another high-scoring affair in Vaught Hemingway on Saturday. The Arkansas secondary just needs to survive, just needs to be serviceable, and the Razorback defensive line has to produce some negative plays in regards to getting Jackson Dart on the ground. The Arkansas defensive line's played better this year. It's one of their better units just off continuity with Deke Adams, the defensive line coach, coming back. First time they've had a back-to-back position coach stay, I think, in 3 or 4 coaches, which is crazy to think about. But they're better. The whole defense is better. Is it great? No, but it's improved. Couldn't be much worse. But they need to get some negative plays, sack Jackson Dart a couple of times. I think the Ole Miss offense could stall out some offensively. Usually, though, may not be the first drive. Lane Kiffin's first 25 scripts, he's one of the best in the country. In fact, Ole Miss, I'd love to go look at the statistic of Ole Miss scoring on their first possession. It's really good. They could come out and score, but I think at some point, after the emotional win last week, Ole Miss kind of stalls out, gets stagnant on offense at some point, especially when they're probably a little bit looking ahead to their bye week on the horizon as well. But remember, the key will be Arkansas running the football and converting third downs. They want to keep the Rebel offense on the sideline where they sit on the football for 8 to 10 play drives. I think this one will be a 3 to 10 point game throughout with Arkansas playing catch up. But I think ultimately they have a critical turnover late that just breaks their back in the fourth quarter. Give me Ole Miss 38-30. I don't think Ole Miss covers, but I do think they get the win. 38-30. Important game for Ole Miss. If they win this game, they head into their bye week before a game at Auburn, which obviously Jordan Hare is going to be tough. But if A&M beats Alabama, it'd be a good Saturday for Ole Miss if you're an Ole Miss fan and you're Lane Kiffin and his Rebels. That'd be a good – if you're an Ole Miss fan, that's a perfect Saturday. Now, if you probably threw in Western Michigan beat Mississippi State, that'd be even better if you're an Ole Miss fan. But if they get a win against Arkansas and A&M beats Alabama, they're right back in that SEC West race. But I do like Ole Miss. on Saturday. Maybe starting a little slow or stalling out a little bit on offense. Remember, they got a bye week again next week, like I keep mentioning, but I do think they survive this one. They don't cover, but Ole Miss gets the 38-30 win. Then obviously the other one, we got the Mississippi State Western Michigan game on Saturday as well for the Mississippi State fans out there. That game kicks off at 11 a.m. on the SEC network. Western Michigan's not bad. The line's 20.5. I think the last time I checked. Let's see that. Let's just make sure. Yep, 20.5 right now. So that's kind of where we stand. So it'll be interesting to see. Mississippi State can't just roll the balls out. This is a get-right game for them, but they also got to respect Lance Taylor. Used to be at Alabama a little bit, was with him there. He's the first-year head coach there. So it'll be interesting to see. They can't just roll the balls out. They have to play well, but this is a chance for them to get back in rhythm. But let's move to it, guys. Y'all know what it is. Money-making weekend before we get you out of here. Again, 25-24 on the season. 52% on the season. We've only gotten better. Like I keep saying, more film equals more money in your pocket. It's never too late. We'll get the graphic out tomorrow with it, but let's get right to it. I like a couple over-unders here, guys. Georgia, Kentucky. Give me the under 49. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. Georgia knows they're not going to go win with style points. They're going to play good defense, stop the run. They're going to try to establish a run game, throw off play action, new clock rules. Give me the under. It's going to be a low-scoring game for Georgia, Kentucky here. I have pretty good confidence in that one. And then let's go next one. LSU, Missouri, over 64.5. Feel pretty good about that. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. Both offenses lighting each other up. I think LSU has some major defensive issues with the staff and players right now. I think LSU is still going to be able to put up points on offense. I think they have the best offense in the SEC. I know they lost last week to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss put up points, but I do like LSU over Missouri, over 64.5. Kansas State, Oklahoma State tomorrow night. I like the under 48 on this one. Both teams are not explosive. Oklahoma State's not very good on offense at all. Kansas State likes to run the football, run with Will Howard at quarterback. Give me the under on the road in Stillwater, under 48. Texas, Oklahoma. I like the under 60 here. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball more than people think. I think it's to be under. I think it's to be an under 60 game here. And then call me crazy. Southern Miss -1.5 against Old Dominion. Old Dominion, not a bad team. But why is Southern Miss favored in this one? There's been a couple games all year. The Missouri-Kansas State game, the line was funky. People were wondering, only 4.5, Kansas State's going to win. Missouri won the game. What was it, the Florida State-Clemson one? 2 weeks ago, people were like, only 1.5 they're giving Clemson. Florida State's going to kill them. When Florida State ended up covering, but it was close, went into overtime. But each week there's kind of been one that you're just kind of like, huh. Kind of the Auburn-Georgia one last week. People were like, only 14.5. This is kind of that one to me. Won't get national coverage because it's a Sun Belt game. It's Southern Miss, Old Dominion. Give me Golden Eagles, though, here. I think they're going to simplify their plan. I think they're going to come out back against the wall. Give me Southern Miss to cover -1.5 here. Then Ohio State. I think Ohio State big in this one. -19 against Maryland at home. Give me Ohio State. I think we're going to be talking about Ohio State on Sunday and Monday next week. I like Ohio State big in this one. And then Florida State -12.5 in the first half against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's not a good football team. Florida State's due to go play a really good game again at home at Doak Campbell. First half, I think they're going to be up by 2 or more touchdowns. Give me Florida State -12.5. I honestly didn't like a lot of lines this week, if I'm being honest with you. So that's why I only got 7. I know a couple of weeks I've had 13 or 14 picks. That's how I've got it back up so well. But again, I'm not just going to pick games just to pick them. Only pick 7. But again, give me Georgia, Kentucky under 49. LSU, Missouri over 64.5. Kansas State, Oklahoma State under 48. Texas, Oklahoma under 60. Southern Miss -1.5 against Old Dominion. Ohio State big -19 over Maryland. And Florida State big in the first half, -12.5 in the first half at home against Virginia Tech. So that's about all we have on this episode of Mach 10 Sports, the Week 6 preview around the SEC. Well, Week 6 previewed all 5 conference matchups for you. It's driver's seat game. Driver's seat weekend in the SEC East, SEC West. SEC East with Georgia and Kentucky, Alabama, A&M in the West. Got a big one, kind of a weird game, Arkansas, Ole Miss. What happens there? Ole Miss coming off the big emotional win. How do they handle that? Arkansas has to have it. And then we talked about Florida, Vanderbilt. Again, Florida has to have that. Where does Vanderbilt go from here? Really rolled through all those games. Then we also gave you talked about Kirby Smart thinking every SEC team should be ranked. Photo shoots on unofficial visits are now gone in the SEC. Been a crazy week in Fayetteville. We got Dan Enos, the OC, responding to emails from students, strength coaches' wives saying if you have nothing good to say, don't say anything, then blocking everybody. Sam Pittman getting on the offensive line's ass, saying to the University of F in Arkansas they need to get it going. I think they're going to roll into Oxford a little bit of a fire. That's why I think it could be a little closer than people think. Then also the money-making weekend, baby, trying to improve on the 25-24 record in the season, get it above 52%, which is where we sit right now. I gave you 7 guaranteed bets I feel good about. I'll post those tomorrow around lunch. But again, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. You have a fantastic evening.